Good morning. Thank you for having me. My name is Lachelle Lochardet. I come to you from Dharma Zen Center and from the work I do here in Portland and all over the world online from Wise Heart. This morning, I want to talk about using your attention wisely and how our attention helps us become the person we want to be and contribute in the way we want to. For me, I'm so passionate about this. I come from a background in which I grew up going to church and Catholic schools, and my dad exposed me to a lot. He often told me stories about the plight of Native Americans and exposed me to information about African Americans and slavery and on and on and on. And so he had a very big compassionate heart, but he was also given to fits of rage. And so he inflicted a lot of horrors on the people around him. So I saw this incongruence. And from a very young one, I dedicated myself to finding the answer to how can these deep spiritual values and these compassionate hearts come forward and live moment by moment in our mundane world. So training our attention is, I believe, one way to help us manifest our spiritual values in daily life. And today I want to just touch on two aspects of that, two primary aspects. Talk a little bit about conditioning and how that interacts with attention. And then touch on the Four Immeasurables, which is a Buddhist teaching. So conditioning. So I think one of the most critical parts of transformation is to admit that you are subject to so much conditioning. And I think today, especially, we have this wonderful positive social pressure to become ever more aware of that conditioning. To admit to ourselves that we, here in the United States anyway, especially swim around in a system that promotes racist views, prejudices, and biases, and that we can't really shift the system without also shifting our internal sense of things, without waking up to our own conditioning and freely admitting to that. Being able to do that, I want to name three things for doing that. That incredibly important work of making the unconscious conscious so that you really can choose. Because we can say, oh, I'm going to choose to direct my attention in beneficial ways, but we're not really choosing if we're not conscious of limiting beliefs, limiting views, biases, etc. So one of the first things we can do is really dedicate ourselves to waking up to that conditioning. Three things I'll name for that process that you're very familiar with. One is meditation. So without some practice in which you intentionally direct and really you're training your attention, right? You're training your body, heart, and mind to focus on some subtle object like your breath, the sound of the wind in the trees, the sensation of your hands on your lap, something subtle, right? And to hold your attention there. When you train your body, heart, and mind to hold your attention on a wholesome, subtle object, you interrupt the habits that are constantly going. Habits have momentum, they have energy. So unless you interrupt them, they're the boss of you. And you want to be the boss of you. You want to have some legitimate, valid choice about how you direct your attention. and make space. And meditation is making space for wisdom greater than us, hopefully, to flow through. The other is having a system of feedback. Certainly in Zen Buddhism, the tradition I come from, that's very highly valued. It's highly valued among the Sangha, what we call the Sangha, each other in our community. And the Zen student-teacher relationship is a place where Zen students are to bring their practice and reveal, this is what's happening, this is where I'm getting reactive, this is what I'm aspiring to, so that they can really get feedback. You can't see yourself by yourself. So however you do that, but making sure that you create a system of feedback. For me, throughout my life, Zen teachers, therapists, and friends who have been willing to say the hard things. Wow, I can't believe how grateful I am for the friends who said, you know that thing you're doing right there? Nobody likes it, right? And it's painful to hear in the moment, but it's so important for our transformation. We have folks willing to say that. And then, of course, the more we can expose ourselves to what are these patterns made up of, right? And white fragility. On my website, wiseheartpdx.org, on the top bar, we have a bunch of resources for reading and becoming more aware of topics about racism and how we are conditioned in that system. And beyond that, reading, like I have found any system of personality typing super helpful. Anytime you can see a pattern and recognize yourself, then you get to be a little bit bigger than that pattern, right? You get to interrupt the process of saying, this is me, when actually it's conditioning, it's patterns of adaptation. Who you are is infinitely complex, alive, dynamic, constantly changing. Is not limited to your conditioning and to these patterns. So looking into these patterns of reactivities, descriptions of patterns of power, use of power, is another way to wake up to our conditioning. In addition to waking up to our conditioning, we can hopefully use it for our advantage, right? That's the fun thing about conditioning. You know, in the mundane world, in your day-to-day life, it's super convenient that you don't have to learn to drive your car every time you step into your car and go somewhere, right? That's conditioning working for you, these habits that serve your life. And so intentionally cultivating habits of directing your attention builds a certain momentum in your consciousness, and it shapes the consciousness you bring to all the incredible service work you're already doing. So I want to talk about 3 things about conditioning your habits of directing attention. I want to talk about examining the quality of your attention, clarifying your intention, and then knowing where to direct your attention. And in this case, for our purposes today, the 4 Immeasurables. The quality of your intention, learning to describe that maybe is the first step, right? I'm sure you've had the experience of maybe you went on a hike, but your mind was so preoccupied with something at work or some conflict in your life that you kind of barely smelled the fresh forest air. You kind of barely saw the trees or the creek. You had a clouded, distracted, maybe unsettled kind of attention. Yeah. So just noticing the quality of your attention can help you wake up to, oh, the quality of my attention is not life-giving right now. I'm missing out on this hike or this moment of watching the sunset. And looking for cultivating a quality of attention that can be stable, that can be intentional, right? Volitional, deep, relaxed, clear. You know. Martial arts, some martial arts do a nice job of describing quality of attention, right? They're often teaching a quality of attention that's broad and relaxed and at the same time very focused. So just noticing that goes a long ways towards helping you train your attention. And then intention and attention, of course, are in this circle of co-conditioning. To me, it is essential, a must for a spiritual practitioner of any tradition to start every day and end every day with affirming your intentions for your life and saying that to yourself as clearly as you possibly can. Right? For me, I like to clarify my intentions, and then sometimes I do an art project with them, right? Just to see how deeply I can bring those intentions in. But then pretty soon I have to toss away my art projects because I've clarified my intention even more, right? Then I get to do new art projects. Keeps me joyful. So as your intention is incredibly clear and you keep clarifying it, then your attention follows your intention. And it's much easier as your intention is clear to kind of corral your attention in the way you want it to go. Also, it gives you something to check in with. If you don't have a clear intention, there's no way to kind of check in with where your attention is going and whether it's helpful for you, right? When you have a clear intention, like my intention is to attend to suffering and bring compassion to suffering today. Or my intention is to express gratitude and to celebrate with others, to find joy in their joy. My intention is to engage loving thoughts, speech, and behavior. My intention is to become quiet throughout the day and drop all judgment, to go to stillness again and again. My intention is to listen to something greater than myself. Whatever your intention is, you can check in throughout the day. Is where I'm directing my attention right now really helping me manifest that? I heard recently someone said that a friend of theirs does news media for 6 hours a day. It's someone who's retired, right? 6 hours of news media. Yikes. Do you really want to shape your consciousness with 6 hours of news media a day? Regardless of the news media, right? It can only go so far. Even the best of the most wholesome of channels, news media, has a big bias around drama. So when your intention is clear, then you have a way of checking in with yourself. And then the last piece is asking yourself, in those moments when you wake up, you want to be able to have a practice that you can go right to, right? That practice is so in you, is so in your body and in your heart and in your mind, that as soon as you wake up and remember and ask yourself, what am I doing with my attention right now? You can go to that practice, right? At our temple at Dharma, it was neglected for many years, and it became a place for people to come and do drugs and do various things. And so still, after 7 years of reclaiming the land for native habitat and for our temple, we are cleaning up a lot of needles. We are asking people to not stop and do drugs on our land. And when we first find a pile of needles, or when I find a pile of needles, like my first reaction is, ugh, right? There's that aversion. I want to move away from that energy, from that type of living of life. And then, on good days especially, my intention kicks into gear. Whoa, aversion is not shaping my consciousness in the way I want to. It's certainly not helping the person who use those needles. And then to be able to know, oh, I can shift to compassion right now. May the person who's caught in this addiction be free. May they have relief from suffering, right? And I can change my heart, relax my body, change my thinking, release that aversion. So the Four Immeasurables is an example, and compassion just there is one of those examples. And Jocelyn named them compassion, sympathetic joy, loving kindness, and equanimity. And these are wonderful practices by themselves. And in addition, the thing I find so wonderful is that they're meant to create emotional and mental balance for you. So I'm sure you've heard of compassion fatigue or compassion burnout. These practices are saying, ooh, yeah, if you spend too much time giving your attention to the suffering of others and generating that compassion, then you can start to slide into fatigue and despair. You can only be there so long. And so in this framework of the Four Immeasurables, then the teaching is to shift your attention to sympathetic joy. Right? To consciously notice, oh, I've been in compassion, I've been focusing on suffering, I've been taking action to contribute. And before I get exhausted and caught in despair, let me shift my attention to celebration, right? And look around for who is demonstrating virtue and how can I celebrate their qualities, or how could I celebrate my own virtuous qualities? However you might define virtue. How can I express gratitude or appreciation? Thank you, Jocelyn, for taking your life energy today to run this whole service, right? I can just move my attention to what am I grateful for? Who can I celebrate, appreciate? And that joy, let that joy be my focus, right? Let joy get all my attention. And then if I were to spend all the time there, I would like to find someone who spends all the time there, but let's imagine. Then if we focus too much on that, maybe it could slide into kind of a superficial, pleasure-seeking, let's party kind of, not as life-serving mind, heart, body. And so the teaching of the Four Immeasurables says, then we might shift into our loving kindness practice. Loving kindness practice, naming the ways we love and appreciate ourselves, focusing on our true love and care. Often this teaching says, start small, right? I usually start with my cat or my bunny, because those relationships are really simple. And it is like so incredibly easy to just find my love for my cat and my bunny. We don't have arguments or anything like that, right? So you use some simple, very loving relationship, maybe as your access door to that sense of love in your heart. You can breathe through your heart. And just give your attention to love and the expression of love through your body, speech, and mind. And you can say a prayer, right, at any time. May you be happy, may you be well, may you be at peace. That's something I do when I used to go places, right, before COVID. And when I went to places, I rode my bike around town. Portland's a very bike-friendly town. And my practice on my bike is every time I pass by someone not in a car, like on a bike or walking, I say a prayer for their well-being. May you be happy, may you be at peace. Whatever's authentic for me in the moment, I let that prayer just arise. Sometimes love and loving practice can slide into possessing. right? Especially in our closest relationships, right? Why hasn't your daughter called you in 3 weeks? That kind of, I want to get love from my daughter or a partner or a friend. So when that loving kindness practice slides into possessing or grabbing, then the teaching says move to equanimity. Equanimity is probably the teaching that we hear least about in the general public. Maybe a word not used very often. Possibly a word very misunderstood. I think I just have a couple more minutes, Jocelyn. I'm tracking the time, so you know, but you can give me a sign if you like. Equanimity is not meant to be an impassiveness, right? Or an indifference or an apathy. Equanimity is meant to be an engaged, warm relationship to life that is characterized by an ability to be with whatever's happening without trying to push it away or pull at it. Yeah. So if you wish your daughter would call you more often, and she calls and says, look, I'm totally overwhelmed with work. I just am not going to be calling right now at the regular time, right? And in that moment, maybe you do some self-empathy first and feel your own grief, right? But part of equanimity is I can be with the grief and pain I feel about that. I don't have to lash out at my daughter or criticize myself for doing something wrong, right? Equanimity says I can be with this. I trust myself to just be still with this, notice and allow. A prayer for equanimity might be something like, may you find stillness, may you have an evenness of mind, may you be grounded in peace. And if you're practicing equanimity and you start to slip into disconnected indifference or apathy, then you would return to compassion. And then we've done the full circle. So I encourage you going forward to consider this power, right? This amazing power and resource you have of your attention and how you use it. What are you letting your attention rest on? Either internally with your own thoughts, with your own emotions and body sensations, and also externally, what media are you taking in, right? As you're a passenger in your car, you could watch the traffic, but you could also look off at the trees and enjoy nature, right? There's all these little moments where you get to choose where you direct your attention. And notice, what happens when I direct my attention here or here or here? And what choice would I like to make? Thank you so much for having me. And I hope this was helpful and of service to your life.